Hey, welcome back, everybody. So glad to see you here. I'm Stacy Mann. I am the director of SPIA in New Jersey, which is the place-based public policy program here at Princeton. And we focus on bringing the student and faculty community into conversation with the people who are leading change in the state of New Jersey, with a real insistent emphasis on the opportunities and the challenges surrounding multiracial democracy in the state. I am delighted that our keynote today is Aria Florant, who comes to us from a range of bold-faced institutions that will be familiar to you, but really with a kind of heart and mind-driven approach to reparations work. And as we think about the specific constellations and constraints around this work in New Jersey, we are so lucky to hear from Aria about how she came to the work, about what she has seen in her work around reparations nationally, and just to give us some guiding wisdom about how to move forward working together. So Aria is the co-founder and the CEO of Liberation Ventures, which she founded in April 2020. And whose work is ongoing nationally. And she is a teaching fellow at the same time at the Harvard Kennedy School. And she interestingly comes to this work from the private sector, from McKinsey and Company. So she has experience and insights that we don't always get in these spaces. That come from also the corporate world, and I think brings to these questions a kind of vision that is really rare and significant. So I'm delighted to introduce Aria Florant.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Do I need to be, can you hear me like this? All right. Good afternoon. I am grateful to Ira and Princeton and SPIA and all the other acronyms of people who put this day together. My name is Aria Florant. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Liberation Ventures. Liberation Ventures is a field catalyst accelerating the reparations movement and building a culture of repair for all people in the United States. Our North Star is comprehensive financial and non-financial federal reparations. And our role is to support the extraordinary organizations across the country that are advancing this cause, many of whom you've already heard from today. We do this through three primary areas of work: mobilizing resources, changing the narrative, and strengthening movement capacity and connective tissue in order to make comprehensive reparations common sense and commonplace in our lifetime. Our goal is to help the movement become more than the sum of its parts. So why are we here? What's the problem? You heard a lot about it today. It's impossible to talk about anti-racism or accountability in America without talking about repair. I don't have to tell you the stats. Racial wealth inequality in this country is staggering. The median Black household has just 15% of the wealth of the median white household, and that wealth gap is not incidental. It is the result of a long and deliberate history. From the founding of this country, Black people were wealth. Our ancestors were treated as capital, their bodies owned and exploited. Black women especially created wealth for their enslavers in two ways: in the fields and by giving birth. After emancipation, the harm did not stop. The broken promise of 40 acres and a mule, Jim Crow atrocities, redlining, mass incarcerations, the war on drugs, the list goes on. These are just a few of the systemic injustices that have extracted wealth from Black communities for generations. As Stacy mentioned, before founding LV, I worked at McKinsey. I will say, before I worked at McKinsey, I was a grassroots organizer, and that is the deepest part of my identity, so I just have to name it. But when I was at McKinsey, we conducted research on the racial wealth gap, and one of the most striking findings was that 60% of the disparity in annual wealth flow between Black and white families is being driven by intergenerational wealth transfer. So that means that only 40% of that gap can be explained by return on investments and savings potential. It means that closing the gap requires more than just economic opportunity. It requires repair. And efforts to narrow that gap over the last century have failed. That gap is increasing. Even if white wealth stayed stagnant, which we know it will not, at our current rate, it would take, as Ryan mentioned earlier, 228 years to close the gap. So that's almost as many years as slavery itself. And wealth matters because the wealth gap is itself a symptom and a cause of systemic racism. In a capitalist system, wealth offers a head start, enabling better outcomes in education, employment, health, and more. And over lifetimes, these advantages compound, so assets appreciate and provide a safety net, offering security and fueling risk-taking. We can't educate our way out of this problem. The wealth gap actually grows when you control for higher levels of education. Financial inclusion efforts are well-intentioned, but they completely miss the mark. Research shows that Black people do not spend their money any differently than other racial groups. And private investments in Black businesses and entrepreneurs do help individuals, but they do not address the problem's main driver, which is lack of intergenerational wealth. But wealth is not all that matters. So do the stories that we tell about Blackness. The fictional ideology of racial hierarchy, anti-Black narratives, and a lack of institutional truth-telling also uphold these disparities. When we don't learn historic truths, we lack context about how systems and structures created today's inequitable America, making us susceptible to racist ideas that then justify the status quo. And these problems persist because America has never repaired one of its founding harms, 10 generations of chattel slavery. This is a problem not just for Black people, but for all people. In The Sum of Us, Heather McGhee writes about how racism hurts everyone through the widespread withdrawal of public goods and investment for all, from the closure of public swimming pools to the undermining of universal health care, quality education, and environmental protection. And in addition to material costs, all Americans bear the scars of slavery's moral injury. Slavery was a material harm, and it was a spiritual and moral one. Such dehumanization does not leave anyone unscathed. Victims, perpetrators, and implicated bystanders alike are entangled in this, and all actually can be estranged from their own humanity as a result. As James Baldwin wrote, "Whoever debases others is debasing himself." Harm that goes unrepaired entrenches inequality, which erodes democracy. Repair as a concept is older than our nation. It's embedded in every faith tradition. It's required in every marriage or close friendship. And it is mirrored through biological regeneration in the natural world. and how humans heal physical wounds. Our relationships, our planet, and our bodies depend on the ability to repair for survival. And so too does our society. So what's the solution? What does repair mean? What are reparations? I get this question a lot. How do you operationalize such an abstract concept as repair? At the highest level, a reparations process is the process of the state making amends for harm. Many people think reparations are simply financial compensation, but in reality, reparations involve a much broader set of material, systemic, and symbolic actions aimed at repairing harm for victims, their families, and society as a whole. Many international institutions have developed frameworks for articulating reparations, and they look different depending on the harm that they're meant to repair, both in the US and all around the globe. At Liberation Ventures, we apply the comprehensive UN definition of reparations to the specific human rights violations of US chattel slavery and its modern legacies. We define reparations as 4 component parts in an iterative cycle: reckoning, acknowledgement, accountability, and redress. Reckoning is understanding or grappling with the harm, and not only just the harm, the what, the who, the how, the why of all of the actions that contributed to that harm. Acknowledgement is public admission that harm has been done, public admission of what you learned in that reckoning phase. Accountability is ownership and commitment to taking action, ceasing, and repairing harm. And redress is acts of restitution, financial compensation, rehabilitation, proactive steps taken to embed racial justice into systems and heal the wound. So all 4 components of our framework are critical. Alone, they are unsatisfactory. They feel hollow. But it's together they make each other real. We believe that this framework can actually operate from the micro to the macro, from individual relationships to national policy. If you don't believe me, try it with your spouse next time you are in conflict. It helps. Comprehensive reparations require a portfolio of policies that address all 4 of these elements. But beyond policy, repair is also about cultural transformation. By culture, we're talking about the norms and behaviors and rituals that also do these 4 things. Policy change is actually only as durable as culture change. In essence, LV is trying to build a culture of repair in the US. Because culture is society's way of life. It's the prevailing beliefs, values, norms of a group of people. It's infused in all aspects of our lives. It shapes and is shaped by dominant narratives, the ideas and themes conveyed by a collection of stories. And it's expressed in the laws, the customs, the day-to-day behavior of people as they interact with one another. And what we believe it's important to teach our children, in the values that our authority figures role model, in the stories that we tell about our society. So a culture of repair is a culture where any time harm is caused, individuals and institutions have the skill and the will to repair it. Having a culture of repair would mean that individuals know how and are expected to repair harm using that cycle. Kids learn how to repair as they come of age, just like they learn math and reading. Everyone is motivated to repair harm because it's a cultural norm. It is socially unacceptable not to. And having a culture of repair would mean that public and private institutions are held to the same standard. They have the capacity and reinforcement mechanisms to repair harm whenever it's caused. Our cultural, legal, and political systems promote follow-through on this expectation. Practicing repair is an obvious, necessary contributor to building trust with consumers, constituents, and beneficiaries. making repair a requirement for any institution to survive. These are also the concepts that I know animate Ira's work and what I've heard discussed here today. So if individual repair happens at the micro level, reparations must happen at the systemic macro level, then maybe institutions are at the meso level. They do play a big role in setting and maintaining culture in this country, in how they choose to treat employees, what their leaders role model, and what they choose to espouse in the world. They have real power to actually build a culture of repair. But why does this actually matter so much? What are the benefits of a culture of repair? A culture of repair actually benefits all of us. In any heterogeneous society like our multiracial democracy, differences between people and cultures can cause breakdown and conflict and harm. This happens because humans are human, and our humanity means that we will make mistakes. We recognize that there will never be a world with absolutely no harm, and that is the heartbreaking yet also liberating truth of our work. So our society then is only as strong as our ability to repair harm anytime it's caused. We have to have that skill and will. So this raises an important point, which is that reparations and repair are not just relevant to Black people. They benefit all people. Many communities have received reparations in the US and around the world. Japanese Americans received reparations after being incarcerated during World War II. Jewish Holocaust survivors received reparations from Germany. Yet somehow, when reparations are discussed in the context of Black Americans, the term somehow becomes politically fraught. This is precisely why we insist on using the word, because Black communities, like all others who have suffered historic injustice, are equally deserving of repair. So imagine a world where a culture of repair was the norm. Imagine how Indigenous, Latino, and Asian communities, who have also faced systemic racial oppression, could access truth-telling, accountability, and compensation for the particular forms of harm and discrimination that they have faced at the hands of government. Imagine how individuals of all races who are forced to labor in prison without pay, targeted by the war on drugs, or unlawfully detained in cages could not only be freed, but also begin to heal and seek restitution. And imagine how white people could realize their shared stake in the liberation of Black people. As Baldwin again put it so perfectly, the price of the liberation of white people is the liberation of the Blacks, the total liberation in the cities, in the towns, before the law, and in the mind. Now, more than ever, we need these narratives of solidarity to be the glue between our movements. Because imagine how much stronger our democracy could be if anti-Blackness could no longer be used as a wedge in our politics. Imagine that Trump could not denigrate the Somali community using anti-Blackness as a tool to instill fear in voters, because actually nobody would buy it. Nobody would buy it because everybody knows that Black people are as worthy and deserving and valuable as absolutely everybody else. And imagine how much stronger our democracy would be if the government built trust by actually repairing harm rather than perpetuating it. Repair is truly for all of us, and it is required for our democracy to survive. So how do we do this work in this political moment? It's the elephant in the room. It's not really an elephant anymore. We are not even 1 year into a very dangerous political era, one marked by rising authoritarianism, deepening racial resentment, blatant xenophobia, and aggressive attacks on civil rights. We have seen the Trump administration enact a barrage of policies that threaten the safety, security, and stability of all of our communities. Massive layoffs in critical government offices, wholesale elimination of DEI programs, and immigration raids on our communities. These are only the beginning of what's to come in this administration. And the harm inflicted by this era will be vast, from rollbacks of hard-won racial and economic justice policies to the criminalization of dissent. Yet for many Black people, this erosion of democracy is not new. We have long lived under a system where the rule of law has been applied unevenly or outright dismissed for us, where police violence, stop and frisk, and other forms of systemic injustice have operated with near impunity. The truth is, the anti-democratic realities that we face today are rooted in harms that were never fully addressed. Because this nation has failed to reckon with the historic and ongoing subversion of democracy for Black communities, we are now witnessing that spread more broadly. But history teaches us that periods of repression often fuel the very movements that undo them. To heal from these harms and to halt this backsliding, we must build a coalition toward a new political era, one that centers and demands repair. To build this coalition, we can acknowledge that reparations policy is currently less viable at the federal level, but that does not mean that it is not viable at all. At LV, we believe that reparations will come to Washington, not from Washington. We know that the groundswell of support for this work is critical. And since our inception, our strategy has been bottom-up. Over the last 5 years, we've learned from other at-scale successful political movements, from marriage equality to civil rights, and observed that many have built momentum at the local and state levels before reaching national policy. New Jersey is leading the way for us. So our strategy reflects this approach with 3 priorities: state and local efforts, narrative change, and building an at-scale multiracial mass movement. Each of these priorities is a building block to the larger effort to create lasting change. And to make these priorities a reality, we need collective engagement, shared learning, spaces like this one that deepen our understanding of and commitment to repair. Our movements are only as strong as our ability to work collectively, and in particular across silos. This requires building and maintaining real relationships and trust. We cannot let long-term systemic change efforts wither, or else we will not be ready to act in formation when the pendulum swings back in our direction, and it will. There is actually so much reason for hope. I want to dig into 3. The first is history. The history of other movements actually completely validates the trajectory that the reparations movement is on. Public support for reparations has more than doubled over the last 25 years. It currently sits at 36% nationally, and that's about 10 percentage points higher than it was for marriage equality when that movement accelerated. Our analysis modeled support trajectories across other movements as well. Same-sex marriage grew 11 percentage points in a decade before accelerating toward majority consensus. Marijuana legalization gained 13.5 points in 10 years. So with dedicated investment and people power, we project reparations support can rise by at least 10 points in the next decade and move toward a tipping point. Second reason for hope is precedent. The US has done this before. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which gave $20,000 to every living Japanese American who was incarcerated during World War II. In 1994, Florida approved reparations for survivors of the Rosewood Massacre. In 2015, Chicago passed a local ordinance giving reparations to 57 survivors of police torture. These examples show that reparations aren't new or impossible. America actually has a precedent for repair. And the third reason is momentum. Movement momentum is building. As Jean-Pierre mentioned earlier today, 11 states, 22 localities have work underway, and we are really seeing wins. About a year ago, there was a recent win in Palm Springs, California. Miss Pearl Devers, who was displaced from her childhood home in Palm Springs due to racist restrictive covenants, and then subsequent demolition of the community of Section 14. The city of Palm Springs' actions tore her family apart and caused substantial economic loss as well as emotional trauma. And about a year ago, her organization, Section 14 Survivors, successfully pushed the city of Palm Springs to approve a $27 million reparations settlement. The win not only put them on more solid economic footing, generating positive intergenerational ripple effects for their families, but also officially acknowledged the harm that the city caused its Black residents. This is the kind of thing that can be scaled all across the country. Take New Jersey. NJISJ has done incredible work to document the harms that the state has caused and recognize strategic ways to push the work forward despite the lack of political will. Take California. Governor Newsom passed 2 reparations policies in this last session, not as many as we wanted, and still progress nonetheless. We look forward in particular to putting the pressure on during the governor's race in California next year. And in general, movement leaders across the country continue to make a way, just as our ancestors did. Get Free is organizing a base of young people all across the country. Black Veterans Project is pushing for Black veterans to get the benefits that they were denied in the GI Bill. First Repair is organizing and supporting state and local efforts all across the country. Bliss Collective is advancing solidarity narratives between Black and Indigenous movements and building support for both. Kinfolk is designing creative interventions that memorialize Black history and get people to imagine a world with a culture of repair. Reparations Education Project is organizing monthly meetups and creating a place for everyday people to learn and get involved. National African American Reparations Commission and the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America are providing the movement with critical wisdom from elders who've been at this a long time, helping to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes. I could go on, but there's so much reason for hope. And as we continue to face this difficult political moment, I urge us to remember that hope is not a passive feeling. It's a practice. In the words of Miriam Kaba, hope is a discipline. It's something we nurture daily through action, reflection, and our commitment to each other. By doing the work of repair, by building this movement from the ground up, and by cultivating a culture that's rooted in reckoning, acknowledgement, accountability, and redress, we're actively practicing hope. And we're transforming our world along the way. Through this practice, a flourishing future is not only possible, it is inevitable. Thank you.